Well, welcome back to Barley and Hops. I'm George. Yes, the channel that dares, I say dares, to unlock the mysteries of home distilling in order to ensure that you can participate and still be safe. Yes. Now, we're out here in the man cave today because, of course, I've got a whole bunch of projects and experiments. During these trying times, we have a lot of extra time on our hands. So I had to move out here to the man cave so that I could do another run. We're running a reflux still, and I'm going to run this, sacrifice that sugar wash that we made to make some sanitizer. We've already done a video on that. That's not what this is about. This is, I'm going to make that sanitizer for some local distribution. Sort of our way of reaching out to our community to say thank you, and we are all in this together. Okay, now, boom. Stay tuned, and we're going to get started.
Come all you moonshiners if you want to hear about the kind of booze that's around here.
We are making it happen, and we are running this still. And I'll tell you what I've done up to this point. I've already prepared, as in preconditioned everything. It's kind of got going so I can save a lot of time. I want to save that time so that I can share information with you. Well, it just wouldn't be right if we didn't get a little bit of whiteboard in here. Yes, our next live stream. Please join us. Saturday, April the 4th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Here's how you get in touch with me. There's my email address. Of course, my phone number is there as well. All you do is send a message to that email address. In the subject line, write questions for live stream. And don't forget, that is Saturday, 4 April at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you there. Look, I've got my, let me lay this out for you because I'll tell you, I learned a whole lot today. Well, I made some dumbass mistakes. And I'll share those with you because they were kind of funny in a way because I was like, duh, George, you've done this 1,000 times. I started the PID and I walked up my temperature. And just like some of you, there are some challenges with spreads of temperatures. You know, when you get to the higher temperatures, somewhere near like 170 degrees, you have a more laminar flow of energy. And your PID tends to settle itself out very rapidly and very accurately. Below that, there are some challenges because you don't have a real laminar flow. Now, I heated this up slowly, and you'll see that I have it at 146. I actually shut this down and allowed it to cool a little bit so I could demonstrate this. And it's bouncing up to 167. It'll go all the way back down to 143, and it'll come back on. And it goes all the way back and forth because I do not have a laminar flow, and I've got a really large column here. I've got a 3-inch column. So that has some effect on it, and I'm using a 2,500 watt element on 240 volts. So that should clue you in for those who want to put a 5,500 watt element on a 3-gallon still. Way, way overkill. Okay? It's like putting a rocket engine in a Volkswagen. It'll work. Probably not the most effective thing in the world, but it'll work. Strap yourself in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow that to run. Now, I've already pulled off my 4 shots and heads, and that's what I pulled off. And I actually pulled them off together. So the first 2 ounces per 5 gallons, and I actually have a little over 6 gallons in here. So I accounted for that, and then my heads are in here as well, and it's pretty obvious. You can smell it. I made that face because it's just strong. It's not nasty. It's just strong. And while I was getting ready, a fly buzzed in there. He spent about 3 seconds on the surface. I guess he got drunk and passed out. He's now on the bottom. So that's proof that pure ethanol, or close to pure ethanol, this is about 190 proof, has one hell of an effect on living organisms. Having said that, you know that we did do the hand sanitizer. If you make that a little bit thinner, you can put it in a spray bottle and use it for surfaces and stuff like that. And to answer the question, no, Star San is not, I say again, not an approved a sanitizer or an agent to kill the coronavirus. So now this thing is, see, I even shut off down to 148. I'm going to turn the temperature up here in just a few minutes, and then I'm going to turn my water on to my reflux. Here's what I have, okay? Here's what I have going on. Okay, I'm already heated up. I've got cold water from my, you know it, I've got my air conditioner and my cooler sitting outside, and I'm piping in. I've got a pump. I pump the water in and pump it right back out into it. So that's at a hefty 56 degrees Fahrenheit. And that air conditioner will keep it there. If it gets any colder, I'll unplug it. So I got the water coming in the bottom, coming out the top, and going right back out. What I've done additionally, and you'll see here, I've got a tap, and I've got a small adapter on there, and I've got my water that runs into my reflux chamber. And of course, it makes its way through those cross tubes. You need to see that. Much better. So it runs through those cross tubes, and then it runs right back out into the sink. All right, and then there's my temperature probe at the very top. That's where I'm taking my temperature from. Remember, the point of no return. It's where the vapors exit the still. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. This was running, and it was running at 190 proof, and it's still sitting there. I've got drip every 5 or 6 seconds. So it's still running at 190 proof because that's what has been collected up here, and it is now running through. That will start to precipitously drop because unless I turn that water back on, when I turn the temperature up, this will be operating as a pot still. You follow me? Here's the real difference. In pot still mode, just forget you even see this. All these tubes are not here, and there's no water flowing through here. So all I have is vapor that rises through the column, goes through my point of no return, and into my condenser, and then out into the jar. That's all it does. So what I'm doing is I'm dragging a lot of water with it. I'm dragging a lot of those flavors, a lot of those esters that come with it. And a lot of times, now that is preferable in a whiskey, bourbon, rum, those types of things. But when you're making a high-grade pure alcohol, as pure as you can get it anyway, a vodka, a gin, something like that, a really nice spirit, you want to make sure you get as clean a cut and a draw as you possibly can. So you use a reflux chamber. That's one example or one method. All right, there are many methods, but this is just one. So we turn water on through these cross tubes, and we pre-condense that vapor. And what happens is that it pre-condenses, which means that the most volatile substance passes, and the water starts to drop back out and drag some of that alcohol down with it, and it re-vaporizes and rises again. And it starts to, again, condense. The most volatile substance continue to rise. Therefore, you're pulling pure ethanol as opposed to water-laden ethanol. That's really about as easy of an explanation as you're probably ever going to get. And that's the way you make a reflux work. So, and when you do that, of course, your proof goes up dramatically, and we're going to run it at a temperature that we are going to set once we get the proper flow rate. Now, I'm running this through that parrot that we described yesterday. And here's the collection cup that it's dripping into. And now, George, why aren't you using the audible proof and trail hydrometer? Well, my friends, that thing is in pieces right now. I just did that video yesterday, and I'm working on, you know, I did, yeah. I've got that setting on the bench. That's one of the projects I'm working on. So I'm just going to use this in a rudimentary form and just read the hydrometer. Okay? Let's move on. Okay, it's time to increase the temperature because I know that as I get closer to my magic, and I believe this one is about 176, 178-ish. What happens is that thing balances out very, very accurately. But now that I've turned the temperature up, and you see it hit that temperature rather quickly, watch what happens if you can focus in on that. Now it's going to dance around just a little bit, but watch what happens when I turn on the water to the reflux chamber. You see that drastic drop? That's way too much water, so I need to slow that down to just a trickle, and that's why it's good to use those invisible or those see-through tubes so you can see it's just a trickle there, and then we've arrested that. So you see how that dropped? Look at that drop. And our PID is working hard to bring that back up. Look at there. So that's what we're going to do. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing right now, okay? We're going to arrest that. And so I'm going to play what I call this delicate dance between energy and water. Energy and water in order to get a balance in the still column through the reflux and my exit port. I'll play that balance for the next few minutes and I'll be back. Now, to show you my progress, I have got this and I'm going to show you the water flow, just trickling. And my power consumption, now you see it's changing between 100%, 90, now it's 100%, 90, 70, 60, 50, 30, it's back and forth. So the PID is doing its god-awful best to maintain 178, and I'm bouncing between 181, 180, 179, 177. So it's bouncing around, and I'm okay with that for right now because I still haven't finished balancing. I need to show you the flow of what I've got coming out, and then I'm going to show you the results in the parrot, and then we're going to talk about that. I think you can see that. You can see it's just a trickle, and it's just a really, really light flow. You see that? You notice that? And it's coming out of my reflux chamber about the way that I want it to come out of my parrot. So there's sort of a correlation there, if you may. Now, let me show you what the results are, and then we'll talk about that. Okay, as my PID struggles to maintain the exact temperature, my results right now are right at 88%, which is about 178 proof. 178 proof. So what does that tell us? Can we do better? Yeah, we probably can. But how do we do that? How do we increase that proof by changing one element or one factor? Well, what we need to change is we need to change the pre-condensation that happens in the chamber. Now, see, our PID is already set. And it will continue to bounce around until it settles. And that's fine. And you can hear it as it comes on and goes off through its different levels of power. Especially when it hits 100%, you can hear it go, and then it goes off. So that's working by itself. I don't have to mess with that right now. The one thing that I can do is I can adjust the water flow through the reflux chamber. So if I increase that a little bit, what effect will that have? Yes, my temperature at the top of the column will drop. My PID will pick that up and add energy to try to bring that temperature back up because that's my vaporization point. So I don't have to mess with the PID, I just mess with the water now. Okay, so if I increase the water a little bit, what I should notice over a period of time, because of course I've already got what that 88% alcohol by volume here, that's already filled in the parrot. So I've got to allow a bunch more to get in there and push all of that out, or I could just pour the parrot. Yeah, I know I could pour the parrot out, but I'd rather just wait. But let's increase the water flow and see what the effect that has. There, if we zoom in on our controller, our PID, and let me increase the water flow to about another 30% of what it has. There we go. You can see that? You see the temperature dropping dramatically? Well, not dramatically, but drastically, and then trying to work its way back up. Now, I have not doubled the flow of water through the reflux chamber. I've increased it about 30%. So that real small dribble is now pretty much a pencil size stream, okay? So it doesn't take a whole lot. So I've increased that, and you'll notice it dropped the temperature, but the PID is working now to bring that temperature back up. And what I should notice over a period of time after I go through a cycle of my distillate coming out and going through my parrot, I should see an increase in alcohol by volume or proof. Now, what happens if I don't see that? Well, then it's back to the drawing board. But we kind of know what we're doing, so we'll see a definite difference. We're a few minutes into this, and I did take my own advice. I just dumped the parrot. That's what I like about the Mile High parrot is there's no disconnecting anything. You just move it, dump it, put it back. Oh, now often I get a phone call and it says, George, I'm using the PID and no matter what I do, I can never achieve the set temperature. It never gets there. And of course the next question is always going to be, are you using a reflux? Well, absolutely. Well, okay, well then, let me ask you this. What happens if I have too much water flow through the reflux chamber? We're no longer pre-condensing, are we? We are fully condensing. So that means whatever the temperature of that water is the temperature at that point or close to it, okay? And everything is condensing and dropping back down into the pot. So it's rising, condensing, dropping, rising, condensing, dropping. And the temperature at the top, since you're dropping the temperature so dramatically, there's nothing the PID can do with an element to make it hot enough to overcome that drop. So you're dropping the temperature and therefore it never achieves the temperature you're looking for. So the most likely the cause is that you have too much water flow through your reflux chamber or your deflegmator. And if you do that, what will happen is, yes, your temperature will drop dramatically, but it will drop to such a point that you can never overcome that. Doesn't matter what you do. Okay? Glad we got that one out of the way. See, it's really elementary when you think about it because you're controlling two key factors, energy and water flow. And this is just in a reflux chamber, or deflegmator. Control those two and do that little delicate dance and you're good. Now, another issue that comes up is the issue that I had, first of all, and I'll tell you about my mistake. I had that thing running and all of a sudden it was like 150 degrees and it would drop, within 3 seconds it would drop to 130 degrees. I was like, that's not right. That's not physically impossible, or that's not physically possible. It should not ever do that. And I scratched my head and moved around, did everything I could. I changed probes, I did everything. I was like, this is ridiculous. And then as I was standing there in the cool breeze, you know what happened? Yeah, I had the ceiling fan, which is directly above the still, was blowing, doing a good job. So it was having one adverse effect on the top of that column. So I turned that off and that fixed that problem right away. Well, we were in the middle of it. Oh yes, we got our second quart running really well. We're still at 180 proof. So, and we're still bouncing around. My PID is kind of settling itself out, but it's settling itself out just a little bit lower than my set temperature. Now, why do you think that might be? Yes, the whiteboard. Let me explain what may be happening right now with my system. So this is an error in my system, and I can use this as a demonstration to explain exactly what's going on. I am set to 178, and it's hovering between 172 and it's bouncing back. It's going 168 and it's going back up. So I'm not achieving that temperature and maintaining that. So what do you think may be the effects or the issues here? It's not the PID. The PID is working. Everything else seems to be working fine. I'm just having that temperature spread. Well, it could be, and it's a bit late now, it could be one of two things. It could be water flow. Remember that in that column is you have those vapors that are rising, and they're rising, and they hit those cross tubes, and they pre-condense, and then water starts to drop back down, and then the most volatile substance continues up and then out my condenser. All right? That is what should be happening. It's called pre-condensing. Now, if I'm over condensing, what does that mean? It means I have too much water flowing through here. That means I'm condensing more than is efficient for those volatile substances to keep flowing. So I'm actually cooling. See, this part here of the still is much, much cooler than this part of the still. This part of the still is at temperature. This part of the still is a little bit below that temperature. So therefore, that's why I'm at 178 here, whereas 173-ish is the vaporization of ethanol, which is what I'm trying to achieve here. You see that difference in temperatures? Now, if I've got this at like 171, then what that means is that I'm condensing more than I am vaporizing. So this temperature, or this temperature that I'm trying to achieve here, which would be this temperature flow across that probe, never quite reaches 178. It just kind of, it gets close and it drops, and it gets close and it drops. Now that's one thing that it could be. The other issue that we run into on a regular basis, and people have called in about this, and this happens to them, and once explained, they go, boom, I got it, I understand. And that is, in a lot of cases, let's draw this the same way. I know you love my artwork, all right? Okay, this is the pre-condensing chamber known as a reflux, or in some cases you can call it a deflagmator if you want to. So we know that the temperature is different here, all right? But what we do is, yeah, right, we're gonna outsmart science and everything else, and we're gonna pack this column. And that's quite all right. You put a couple scrubbers in there, put some ration rings in it, whatever you want to put in there. But make sure that whatever you put in the column, you're able to hold it up to your mouth and breathe through it without any restriction. I know of some people, when I talk to them, they'll say, oh yeah, I've got 3 rolls of copper in there, I've got about half a bag of ration rings, I've got some marbles in there, I got some bent up pennies, and a friend of mine told me about rocks. I threw some rocks in there too. Okay. Now what happens is if it's either that or you've just got too tight of a packing. And if that happens and you've got some packing in here that's causing some kind of a restriction, okay, a restriction to breath or a restriction to vapor flow. Remember, you're going to introduce this energy, and this energy is going to start to rise. Now, what happens to energy when it meets a restriction? Yes, it slows down. So when it slows down at about here, it starts to build up. Now, it doesn't have to build up to an extreme amount, but it does start to build up. As that energy is building up, what is happening up here? Yes, the temperature is starting to drop. So your selected set temperature, we know it's cooler here, your selected set temperature in this column that's being sensed by your probe is dropping. So if you're using a PID controller, or here you are with propane, you're turning up the heat. And so you're introducing more energy, and then when you do that, that energy continues to build up, and at some point that energy reaches a point where it overcomes the restriction. And then voila, it blows right past it. Now this is high energy, high temperature, and it blows past the restriction. Your temperature probe picks that up. And then, of course, if you're watching your temperature on a dial or on a digital readout, your temperature starts to spike. Now, let's say, for instance, you had it set at 178, and it spikes up to 190. Well, it does that because that energy has been released. Now, once that energy is released, everything kind of slows down, settles down. And there's only so much of it there. Your PID, is, in this particular case, picks that up and says, oh, wait a minute, shut off, and it shuts off. Well, over a period of a couple of minutes or less, that energy starts to drop. And as it's dropping, if you're using a PID in particular, your PID says, ooh, wow, it's dropping fast. It dropped 3 degrees in 0.3 seconds. I better give it a burst of energy to keep it from doing that. Or you're watching the dial, and you've got an analog dial, and you're watching, you're seeing the temperature start to drop back down. You're like, oh, wow. So you give it a little bit more energy. Well, your PID does the same thing. It gives it a little bit more energy. And what's happening? It's building up more energy, and that energy is meeting that restriction and is starting to build up again. At some point, that energy is going to overcome that restriction. It's going to burst through. This is going to shoot back up, and it will become exaggerated. Now it'll jump to like 195. So this will happen over and over again, and it will progressively get worse. In some cases, this temperature will drop below, goes to 166, and then it hits 195. And you're right here in the middle. You're trying to figure out, how do I keep it there? Well, your problem is not here. Your problem is right here. So you follow me? We've got a buildup of energy that releases. Then everything settles out. Temperature goes up and then starts to cool off. And then the temperature starts to come down. Energy builds up. Once it builds up high enough, boom, it releases again. The same thing happens. So you've got this never-ending cycle. I hope that makes sense. Because those are the two things that normally, almost in every case, affect your temperature probe. Whether that be a dial or whether that be a digital readout, that's what's going to affect your temperature in your reflux chamber or your dephlegmator. Well, I am a victim of my own misfortune. Well, that's okay. You know, we're muscling our way through this, and yes, I've still got this constant 6 to 7 degree spread. So what does that really tell us? And I've messed with the water flow. I've done everything I can. Yep, leads to only one thing: George overpacked his column. Well, you know, it happens, but we've muscled our way through it. It still runs extremely well, and I'm still pumping out right now at 80%, and I'm on my 3rd quart. So we're going to call this a success. And just, you know, sort of mental note, don't overpack that column. Oh, yep, and don't forget, Saturday, April 4th, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Send your questions in or get in line on the phone. Happy distilling.